It is good to see you this morning, and welcome to those who are joining us online. It is my privilege and honor to speak to you from 1 John 1. I'm calling my sermon, Fellowship That Leads to Joy. I can summarize 1 John 1 in a single statement. The biggest difference between Christian fellowship and worldly fellowship is joy. I hope you better understand fellowship when I'm finished, because there are two kinds. I will go through 1 John 1 a verse at a time, and an idea at a time. There is spiritual fellowship, and there is worldly fellowship. And never the twain shall meet. Teacher said, 2 from 4, Jimmy, what's the difference? I said, that's what I say, teacher. What's the difference? That's not a true story. But it exactly symbolizes spiritual apathy that frequents fellowship. Many yawn and ask, what's the difference? They are talking about the difference between some church fellowship and all worldly fellowship. I'm not talking about the apathy that unbelievers have toward religious fellowship. I'm talking about the apathy I've had toward fellowship. The word fellowship is a religious term referring to the interaction of me in a religious setting. I want you to consider the possibility that Christian fellowship can be worldly. I will try to explain how in this sermon. John says that religious fellowship that leads to joy is not in darkness, is with deity, and does not deceive. That's the gist of 1 John 1. Once I planned a barbecue, invited all my coworkers, but not my boss. Things were never the same at work. That was like fellowshipping with others, but not with the Father. It's what John means when he talks about fellowshipping in darkness. Several coworkers refused to attend my barbecue. That's like unbelievers refusing Christian fellowship because they don't see any difference between Christians fellowshipping, between them and their friends, and the fellowship of Christians outside an occasional prayer. Fellowship in darkness does not invite the Father and the Son and is joyless. I attended a school dance my sophomore year. I was 16. I did not have a girlfriend, but I thought I was a sex maniac. I found myself outside in my car alone with Brenda P. She was an attractive freshman, and her boyfriend, Greg S., was inside talking to his friends and ignoring her. She kept trying to get me to take her home. She lived several miles out of town. I did not want to take her home because Greg P. was a jealous guy with a nasty temper. She offered to buy me gas and sat provocatively in the front seat. Part of me wanted to take her home, thinking it would lead to a makeout session. But I didn't because I was afraid. I was like a Christian white-knuckling it while being confronted with temptation. I was in darkness, as such a Christian is in darkness, if you know what I mean. This was not like fellowship in the light. I wanted to make out with Greg's girl, but I did not have the guts to go through with it. That's like not having the joy of fellowship, but being afraid of hell. Religious fellowship that leads to joy is not in darkness, is with deity, and does not deceive. I can sum up the difference between worldly and Christian fellowship in one word: joy. That's the difference between fellowship with the Father and the Son or not. I had been hoping Brenda P. was trying to seduce me. She only wanted to ride home because she was mad at her boyfriend. Those who go it alone are often deceived. But don't you see? God helped me. God kept me from making a fool of myself and getting beaten up by Greg S. Likewise, God helps Christians who don't depend on luck. What seems like luck to so many is exactly the divine providence promised to the Christian. I was literally in the dark that night, and I live in a dark world. But if my fellowship is with the Father and the Son, then I can have joy that comes from fellowshipping. Not in darkness, but in the light. Joy is a light switch. I live in a dark world, but God's light gives me joy in fellowship. I don't have to depend on luck. Brenda P. tried to get me to explore a broken down house, an abandoned house that was across the street. I was afraid for the same reason I gave earlier. I kept saying I didn't want to. She finally gave up, muttered a profanity, and went back into the dance. The forces of darkness had not prevailed. I can't tell you how many times similar things have happened to me when I escaped near disaster with no logical explanation. Maybe you know what I'm saying. Being in my car with Brenda P. under those circumstances was like flirting with disaster, like flirting with temptation. Fellowshipping with the Father and the Son has the effect on me that I do not want to flirt with temptation. I was white-knuckling it, with only my own wit to save me. The kids in the dance were like Christian fellowship, and that's where I should have been. Returning to the dance would have been like fleeing temptation, if you know what I mean. I can't always surround myself with other believers, but I can always have joy and fellowship with the Father and the Son. That's the importance of the Bible. Jesus said he was the Word. Words are powerful. Abraham Lincoln said, "The world will little note nor long remember what I say here 160 years ago. Adolf Hitler's words inspired a nation to unparalleled evil. At the same time, you probably won't remember what I say this morning for very long. That's okay. Words are so powerful that just by hearing them and weighing them in your mind and agreeing or disagreeing with them can change you in ways you can't imagine. So it's important that you and I weigh carefully what I say this morning. Words are so powerful that Jesus' words revealed spiritual truth that was not immediately understood. May my stories also reveal truth that you understand now or later. The Father has spoken to me through His Son. I should weigh carefully what He says. Words enable fellowship with the Father and the Son. Words establish fellowship that leads to joy. The power of words is greatly undervalued by unbelievers. The power of words. By me for a long time too. I said to a cancer victim, "Give me a hug." This person had just recently been diagnosed and was devastated, but immediately responded, "Shouldn't you say, 'Would you give me a hug?'" Words are powerful. Words will be a basis for judgment, Jesus said. Words destroy trust. Words build trust. Words cannot be taken back. I could go on and on and on. I said 5 words to someone once that single-handedly caused a 4.5-year obsession, during which I was miserable and in therapy for 4 years. Words. Words make a difference, for good or ill. Fellowship with the Word gives me joy. I can sum up the difference between worldly and Christian fellowship in that one word: joy. Fellowship that leads to joy is threefold in this passage: Jesus, others, yourself. Religious fellowship that leads to joy is with deity, does not take place in darkness, and is not deceived. What do I get out of fellowship? I'm not saying I can't enjoy fellowship with others that is not with the Father and the Son. Even unbelievers enjoy each other's company. But the passage in 1 John 1 strongly suggests that I'm fellowshipping in darkness and deceiving myself if I shut out the Father and the Son. Then my sin has come between me and God. I witnessed to a woman once and told her that Jesus would forgive her all her sins. She said, "I don't think I'm that bad." I used to think that. I'd been raised in a church to believe I was saved because I was a member of that church not because I was a repentant sinner. Another person told me that the idea of repenting of sin sounded like a drag. The two people I've just cited were deceived about themselves and the Father and the Son. Fellowship that is with the Father and the Son will keep me from being deceived like they were. They did not know the joy of the Lord. Unbelievers are deceived, thinking that they are better than they are and that they are not worthy of judgment. Like the amateur gambler who has lost more than he could afford to lose, but keeps gambling until he is wiped out. If I think I'm better than I am, I'm like that. I have taken tremendous gambles and lost more than I could afford to lose many times, but not in a casino. I despised a coworker, and it showed. That greatly damaged my relationship with my boss because she was his pet. I deceived myself. I thought I should be able to treat her like dirt, and it would be between me and her. But she tricked me. She didn't complain or return dirt for dirt. I complained about the favoritism she was receiving to a coworker, and it got back to my super. He treated me like dirt for the next year and a half until I quit. I was self-deceived to complain about my boss. I thought I was justified to complain. That's like denying my sinfulness. It was a good paying job with great benefits. I quit instead of talking to my boss and apologizing. That's like refusing to confess my sinfulness. To deny sinfulness is to forfeit joy and fellowship with the Father and the Son. To know that I'm sinful and not confess to the Father is like blaming Him for my sinfulness. Then I am deceived. I'm a fool if I ever think I am without sin, even if I have a clear conscience. I have fooled myself time and time again because I have forsaken fellowship with the deity. When I was a senior in high school, I played football, even though I had been seriously injured 3 years earlier. But I didn't attend the homecoming game because it was raining cats and dogs. At halftime, they introduced the players as they left the bus. They introduced me, but I was not there. Coach ran onto the bus thinking I was afraid to come out. He was proud of me. I did go to the homecoming dance. Obviously, I got back to Coach. That Monday, I turned in my togs. I was like a Christian with a bad conscience, denying him or her self-fellowship for the pettiest of reasons. I was like me when I only think about me. Christian fellowship is joyful if it is with deity, if it is not in darkness, and if you are not deceived. I should have invited my boss to the barbecue. I should not have been in my car with Brenda P. late at night. I should not have been like an amateur gambler who loses it all if I want joy. We will sing a verse as you consider the joy triangle: Jesus, others, yourself, and how that applies to your Christian fellowship. It has been a privilege and an honor to preach to you this morning from 1 John, a chapter that explains the difference between Christian and worldly fellowship, and that difference is joy that only God can give. I have discussed spiritual fellowship and worldly fellowship. If joy is missing in your fellowship, now you know why. We'll sing.